In this GlassTrax training video, I will be covering how to enter in processing charges. A processing charge in GlassTrax is something that you add to a piece of glass. So for example, a polish or a beveled edge or holes or notches or cutouts or things like that. Some people even set up tempering as a process, which I have not done in my personal data because I like to have that as its own separate item ID. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I would add a new process or how I would update or edit a current process. So the first place I need to come is Inventory Control, Master Files, and then Processing Charge Maintenance. Now I'm going to act like I'm adding a new process in here, but just so you're aware, if I wanted to pull in an existing process, I could put my cursor here, use my binoculars, find my notch that I want to change, and then I hit this E-edit button, and I can go at this information here and make the adjustments that I need to. But as I mentioned, I want to start this off from scratch. So I'm going to click this N button for new. Once I've started this new, the next thing I need to do is choose how I want to bill my customer. So for this particular process. So I'm going to do this as a flat polish. It's a very simple process to add in. Now I look at my options here and say, do I charge my customer for a flat polish by the square inch? No. By the square foot? No. By the linear inch? Yes. But there's two linear inch options. I have linear inch pieces and linear inch size. So I'll cover the difference here of that in just a moment. The other options are cut pieces, cut size, percentage, which would mean a percentage of your price in addition, or lot, meaning a flat rate, and then pieces per piece of glass. So let me come back and explain. Now I explained I wanted to do a flat polish, which I charge by the linear inch. But let me explain the difference between linear inch pieces and linear inch size. If I were to select linear inch size, I can set up a different price per linear inch depending on the thickness of glass. So if I have one process of flat polish, but I charge let's say I charge 12 cents for 1/8 of an inch of thick glass, or I charge 14 cents for 3/16 glass or 1/4 inch glass. Once I get to 3/8 glass, I charge 18 cents. So it's the same process with different prices on different thicknesses of glass. So if I wanted to come here and let's do that FP here, and I come in here and say flat polish, I'm going to skip these fields for now. I'll come back to those in just a moment. But I'm going to start with that 1/8 of an inch here. And I'm going to say, hey, I charge 12 cents per linear inch. So I put in that thickness of glass right here where it says inches. And then I come down to the next field and I say, all right, it switches again at 3/16 of an inch. And I put 14 cents per linear inch. It switches again at 3/8. And I put 18 cents. At 1/2 of an inch thick glass, I charge 22, we'll say. Now the reason I kept saying it switches again at this thickness is the way that GlassTrax will calculate is it'll do anything from 1/8 up to 3/16 will be 12 cents. Anything between 3/16 up to 3/8 would be 14 cents. At 3/8 it switches to the 18 cents, and then anything between 3/8 up to 1/2 of an inch, it switches again to the 22 at 1/2 an inch. So that's how you can do that. You don't have to put in every thickness of glass and repeat the same pricing point, basically, is what we're doing there. So once I have this set up, I can come through these fields here. Let me go to grind loss. One cool thing that we have in GlassTrax is we have the ability to add grind loss on the back end. So your people who are doing order entry don't have to do math on the fly. If a customer asks for a 34 by 34 piece of glass and they're doing a flat polish on all four sides, they don't have to think, okay, well 34 and a 16th by 34, or in this case, if I'm doing all four sides, 34th and an 1/8 by 34 and an 1/8. They just have to go ahead and say, you know what? It's a 1/16 of an inch for grind loss, and the finished size that my customer wants is 34 by 34. And so when they're doing the order entry, they put in 34 by 34, and then when you send this out to your cutting table, on the back end, we add that 1/16 of an inch to each side that is receiving that flat polish, so that when you get that cut file sent out, it'll actually do that 34 and an 1/8 by 34 and an 1/8, so that when it cuts it, it's a little big at first, and then when you take it to the polishing machine, it gets shaved down to the exact right size that your customer wants. So as long as you define that grind loss correctly, we can send that out to your cutting table and make your life a little bit easier there as well. A setup charge is kind of if you have a setup charge for for all these thicknesses, it's all the same setup charge. You say, hey, we charge $5 plus the 12 cents per linear inch down here, or 14 or 18 or 22. That's your setup fee. The other option is to come here and use the minimum price column. You can come here and say, hey, you know what? We charge 12 cents per linear inch with a minimum of $5. And then at 14 cents, or at the 3/16, it's a minimum of $5 again. Once we get up to 1/2 of an inch, it switches to $7, we'll say. Okay, So that's how you can set up your minimum price. So it's similar to the setup charge, but it's saying, hey, we do this, but we also charge a minimum of those $5 or $7. So once I come down here, you can set up a max base, max height. That is for machinery purposes. If you can't fit a piece of glass that is a 96 by 130 on this, then that makes sense. And if someone puts in 96 by 130 on a sales order and adds a flat polish, it's going to pop up and say, hey, that piece of glass will not fit on the polisher. We can't do that. Here's the minimum over here as well. The customer type, now I can come in here and say, hey, this is for all my A customers. This is their price for this flat polish. Then you can create, another process for your B customers for your general pricing if you want. Most of our customers just leave that blank. Down here we have a minimum square foot. So for example, this would be mainly used for a square footage like sandblasting. Some people do this for their mutton bars or grids. They charge by the square foot, and you can say, hey, we have a minimum of 3 square feet, and it would charge for that minimum 3 square feet. And so again, you wouldn't have to type in 3. You do the math and say, well, whatever my square foot price times 3, that's my minimum price. You can just put 3 right here and it would figure it out for you. Down here, this buyout box that you can check is, do I have the capability of doing this in-house? If so, I leave that unchecked. If I need to send this out to be done for me, then yes, that's a buyout process. That needs to go to a vendor who will do the bevel for me, for example. In this case, it's a flat polish. Hidden is another option down here. Now, the difference between hidden and delete. There's a big difference here. So we do not delete records. We don't like to delete records. And the reason behind that is because this record, let's say this is an existing process, and I've been in business for 5 years, and I've been using this FP code for 5 years, and then I decide, you know what, I'm going to update this, or I'm going to get rid of it. Instead of deleting it out, because there are historical records with FP added as a process, I just hide it. So if I check that hidden box, it won't appear on my lookup screen, so I won't accidentally pick that. But if I had deleted it when it existed on a record, if I were to go back and pull up a sales order that had FP on there, but FP no longer exists, you'd run into a few issues on the reports and on the price calculation because the record no longer exists. I'm going to skip tempered. That doesn't get used anymore. That is outdated. And then down here you can check, is this a printable process? Can I discount it? And then you can actually add this as a quick add-on. So instead of having to add it by hitting the processes button and add and then choosing your process, there's a quick add button that you can use on the sales order screen. This process group / department is where you assign this particular process to a department. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add this to the polishing department. So now what I do, if I've set that up as a department on my production side, so if I ever add this FP code to any piece of glass, it knows at that point, well, we added FP, it must go to the processing group or department of polish. And so that's how we set up the production side there. Now let me come and review this cut pieces and cut size here. I'm going to hit save real quick here, and that's been added to the system. So if I want to change now the difference again between cut pieces and cut size is the exact same as linear inch pieces and linear inch size. The cut size is not referring to the size of the notch or hole, okay? So if I wanted to add in a 1/2 inch hole, I might call it 12 HOL. Oops, I need to hit that N button to do new. 12 HOL. And I'm going to call this 1/2 inch hole. Now, so you can see that's the size of the hole. I put that in my process ID as well as in my description. Down here, it's referring again to the thickness of glass. So again, just to be clear, this is not referring to the size of the cutout that you're doing. So I can come down here and again say, hey, for 1/8 of an inch, we charge $5.50. For, let's say it switches again at 3/16, we charge $6.50. At 3/8, we charge $8. And at 1/2, we charge $12. So now I've got that set up. So again, it's the same process with different pricing depending on the thickness of glass. So that's how you set that up. That is how you do your processes in here. And again, you can call or email if you have any questions on the other bullets here. The one thing I do want to mention now before I end this video is once I've saved this particular process in here and I pull that back in, I can hit edit and I can change the description, I can change the grind loss, the max base, the minimum square footage, whether it's hidden, the processing group or department. I can change all that information. The only two things that I cannot change are my process ID, which is right up here, or how I charge for this. So once you make a decision on how you charge for something and you hit save, make sure you review that because you do not want to accidentally enter in something charged by the square inch and hit save when it's not actually a square inch process. We do have the ability to fix that on the tables on our end, but it might throw some records off in the process. So we strongly encourage you to review these bullets and how you have it set before you hit that save button. And again, feel free to call or email if you have any questions.